Hey everybody, welcome to Westward Books YouTube page. I'm Maddie Weston, and I'm the author for Westward Books. And today I'm going to be reading you the very first chapter in The Roller Kids' First Flight. This is going to give you the introduction to our two main characters, Harley and Bentley Starr. Okay, here we go. The Roller Kids' First Flight, Chapter 1. This was a day pretty much like every other day in Bentley Starr's life. She'd had to walk her little brother down to his friend's house because Miss Rose said he wasn't old enough to go by himself. But Bentley didn't know why she was always the one who had to do it. Maybe she had better things to do than babysit her brother, but nobody ever thought of that. She was on her way back home now, walking along the edge of the woods, kicking at rocks and sticks as she went. Her brother, Harley, thought the woods were cool, but she thought they were boring. She thought their town was boring, and their school was boring, and their whole life was boring. It was different than most kids' lives, since they didn't have a mom or a dad anymore, but it was still boring. Nothing exciting ever happened to Bentley Starr. Once something had happened, a long time ago, but Bentley would say that was more eventful than anything. It certainly hadn't been exciting or interesting or good. In fact, it had been very bad. It had probably been the worst day of Bentley's life, but the weird thing was she could barely remember it, and she didn't care to remember it either. She actually, mostly, tried not to think about it. Still, it would be nice for something exciting to happen just once in her life. At 11 years old, Bentley figured it was about time something happened that was different than every other day in the town of Juniorville. Just as she had this thought, a loud rumbling overhead made Bentley look up to the sky, and that was when her life started to get exciting. In fact, it started to get very, very exciting. Harley Starr and his best friend TJ, Thomas Jong was his full name, but everyone who knew him just called him TJ, were at the kitchen table in TJ's house with his chemistry set. TJ was really into science, and his mom had gotten him the chemistry set for his 10th birthday, which Harley thought was pretty cool. The lady that Harley and his sister lived with, Miss Rose Angela Hernandez, who was their foster mom, not their real mom, though some days she felt like their real mom, had gotten Harley a $20 gift certificate to his favorite comic book shop for his birthday back in May, which was super nice of her, but wasn't nearly as expensive as a chemistry set. Miss Rose just didn't have that kind of money, and Harley knew it, so he had said thank you for the gift certificate, even if he was a little jealous of TJ's chemistry set. It is not about how much the gift costs that should matter, Bentley had whispered to him later, and Harley knew that was true. Bentley had drawn him a picture of his favorite superhero, Lightnap, for his birthday. Harley was working on his collection of Lightnap and the Lightverse comics, but so far he only had 23 out of 52 of the series. And that picture hadn't cost Bentley a single penny, but had still been the coolest present Harley had ever gotten in his life. Bentley was a really good artist. But TJ's chemistry set could make explosions, and that was pretty neat too. "Don't make a mess now," TJ's mom, Mrs. Jong, was saying to them. TJ just grinned at his mom with the kind of grin that Harley knew meant they were absolutely, positively going to make a mess. "Dude, let's add syrup first," Harley told him as soon as Mrs. Jong had left the room. Harley liked to add syrup to all of their experiments because it was his most favorite food in the world, and it made everything sticky. Miss Rose liked to tell him that syrup wasn't a food, just congealed sap and sugar, but Harley didn't believe her. "Okay," TJ said, But whatever else we do, we have to add the baking soda and vinegar last. I love the effect they make, even though I don't like the smell of vinegar. TJ did, indeed, like to add baking soda and vinegar to all their experiments because, mixed together, they made everything bubble over. TJ had done a lot of experiments with baking soda and vinegar. He'd done a lot of experiments altogether. TJ was the only Asian kid in their whole class at school that year, but that wasn't usually why he got bullied. He mostly got bullied for being a science nerd, which Harley thought was ridiculous, since scientists were the only ones who had ever even come close to making a real-live superhero like Lightnap. He was sure that someday they would, too. Harley reached for the syrup, then checked to make sure Mrs. Zhang was out of the room before he said, "Things are about to get messy." First, the boys mixed the syrup together with some leftover lime green gelatin cubes, chopping the cubes up into mush. Then TJ added the baking soda and vinegar. They watched as everything bubbled over, spilling over the edge of the bowl and onto the table. It left behind a brown, watery liquid with green chunks of gelatin covered in foam and bubbles. "Dude, it's almost like a fizzy soup," TJ said. "Yeah, one that nobody should ever eat," Harley started to reply. Instead, he was interrupted by a loud rumble overhead. It sounded like thunder, but not quite. "A storm?" TJ asked, rubbing at his left ear the way he always did when he was nervous. TJ was afraid of storms, ever since the day strong winds had broken his bedroom window. Harley wasn't afraid of storms. Harley was afraid of fire, but he didn't like to think about why. "Maybe if we add some fizzy flavor water?" Harley said, distracting his friend from the rumble in the sky. TJ grinned. "Okay, definitely. Good idea, H. Good idea. That'll make things really bubble because of the carbonation and all." "Cool," Harley said, and grinned at his friend. This was definitely going to be a great experiment. Bentley looked up toward the rumbling sound and saw a giant rock hurtling through the sky, headed for the ground below. It was grayish-black, the color changing in the light, and big, the size of an SUV, but not shaped like an SUV at all, instead more cone-shaped than anything else, and it looked as if it might be glowing a strange orange color. "Like what in the Smokies? Is that a meteor?" Bentley wondered, because she'd never actually seen a meteor on anything other than a TV show before, let alone one falling from the sky. Falling, 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 right toward the woods Bentley was walking beside. She wondered for a minute if she should run toward or away from the meteor, but then decided this was her one chance in the world to see something straight out of a science fiction movie. Like all the aliens and spaceships and black holes she read about in her favorite books, this was her chance to see something from the real, actual outer space. And there was no way she could pass that chance up, no matter how hard her heart was pounding, or how many sweat beads had formed on her forehead, or how badly she was picking at her fingernails from nerves. Bentley did her best to ignore her fear. Instead, she took off running toward the falling meteor. It was gray and orange and glinting in the sun. The glare from it, even as it fell, nearly blinded her as she ran straight into the woods, branches scraping her head and roots tripping her feet as she went. Harley would probably know the right way to run through it all without tripping or falling even once. He knew every tree and rock in the woods and loved to play there. But Bentley was stumbling along, frantic to be the first person to get to the meteor when it landed. Suddenly, she could smell smoke and looked up to see that the meteor was right above the trees. Its back was on fire, and there was smoke trailing along behind it. Bentley froze for just a second and thought about the last time she had seen that much smoke. She almost turned and went back the way she had come, her anxiety bubbling up in her chest like too much fizzy water. But instead, Bentley steeled herself, drew up all her courage, and ran forward, just as the meteor hit the earth. The whole ground shook from the impact, and Bentley fell down into the dirt. She covered her head to keep the smoke out of her face and tried to peek up at the meteor, but it was too bright to look at, and everything around her was turning orange, and Bentley was suddenly very afraid. She wished her brother were there with her. Then there was a loud boom, like gas releasing from something it had been held inside of for many long years. The orange light overtook Bentley, blinding her and covering her, and the ground shook again, and this time Bentley shook with it. The force of something like an explosion hit her, orange light spilling out around her, and her head jerked downward, slamming into the ground. For what felt like a very long time, Bentley was blinded and alone and very, very scared.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. If you want to follow Westward Books, Facebook is the best place to do it, but we're also on X and obviously here on YouTube. If you're looking for the books themselves, not under Peyton's name, although Peyton did get on here, that's my nephew, but under my name, Addie Weston, on Amazon. Thanks so much for listening, and have a great day.